Digital Policy and Law. Y es un enorme placer estar.
And it is an honor and pleasure to be with you once more at these special sessions on Digital Spotlight. And we are talking about different topics that are important in the digital world and public policy and regulation in Latin America. Today, it is my great pleasure to close the year just about with this activity with one of the most important topics before us that have arrived after COVID. This digital spotlight is going to be dedicated to innovation in the digital economy for recovery. Now, pandemics, there have been many for hundreds of years now, to begin with biblical pandemics. But this is the first pandemic that we have faced with the most powerful infrastructure that has existed in civilization, and that is the digital infrastructure, computers, processors, telecommunications networks, the cloud, computing, software, an enormous array of resources that for the first time ever are available to civilization to generate well-being, digital well-being. A good part of all of these concepts in the digital world find their origin recently from the standpoint of public policy. As opposed to other pandemics, if this pandemic had occurred just 5 or 10 years ago, the effects in terms of economic recovery would be completely different. For some reason, this pandemic took place today when we have the highest available technology in the planet. At the beginning of the pandemic, all of the analysts thought that telecom companies and networks would perhaps not collapse, but be very stressed. And without a doubt, they were. But the digital infrastructure proved to have the resistance to reach society and the world with our technology. We have to give value to digital infrastructure and its value to society. We have said so throughout the year. Those who are connected with a device like my phone conserve the exercise of their fundamental rights. From the point of politics, policy, and democracy, they preserve the right to access to information, public information, and rights. From the standpoint of social rights, they preserve the exercise of the right to health and education, the right to access to culture. But from the economic aspect, we now face the opportunity to recover economic indicators and generate economic recovery that is fuller and more efficient than at any other time in the past of our civilization. This is what we will focus on, the economic aspect here in Digital Spotlight, talking about recovering our economic activity during COVID and post-COVID. Many studies in recent months have talked about enormous digital resources, vital resources, digital being for recovery. ECLAC, OECD, and Huawei now have joined these efforts. We have a great panel, which we will begin with today, and very quickly allow me to introduce, first of all, in general, and then I'm going to give the floor to each one of them. With us is Marcelo, Corporate Vice President of Public Affairs for Huawei. Welcome, Mark, Global Vice President for Public Affairs. And Fernando Rojas, Undersecretary for Senior Assistant for Economic Affairs, Fernando Rojas at ECLAC. Also, Hector Guerrero Herrera, Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Mexico. Hector, welcome. Leonardo Alvarez, Director for Innovation, Services, and Trade at the Ministry of Economy of Mexico. Leonardo, welcome to you. Roberto Martinez Illesca, Director of the OECD in Mexico for Latin America. Roberto, you are welcome. Emilio Uquillas, also imperative in digital matters, the representative for CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and Mexico. Welcome, Emilio. Vice Minister for Connectivity from Colombia is going to be with us as well, and he has worked on many projects in digital aspects. Vice Minister Mantilla. Let's talk about, let's introduce Mark Shui first, and we welcome you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to attend this important forum, Digital Spotlight. The pandemic has changed our life and work and brought a challenger to world economy. According to the OECD forecast, the global GDP will get down 4.2% this year. And 1.5 billion children stay at home and cannot access to online education. Today, we are lucky to hold this wonderful online event through the latest technology. Through fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, we accelerate the role of information and communication technologies. Now, ICT have become not only crucial for fighting the virus, but also an engine for the economic recovery and growth. According to their prediction, the global digital economy will reach the $23 trillion by 2025. ICT and digitalization have become a very important growth engine for all countries. ICT infrastructure and ICT talent supply are fundamental. So we suggest government and the private sector invest more on the digital infrastructure and pay more attention to their ICT talent. We deeply understand that global cooperation and collaboration is very important for economy and society. We have been in Mexico and Latin America more than 20 years. We are proud to say we are Latin American company. Huawei in Latin America for Latin America. We work hard together with you to grow the industry and the ecosystem, create high value for Latin America. For example, this year, Huawei has support more than 600 Latin American students from 22 countries to obtain leading ICT technology training, online training in Huawei headquarters. And we have successfully transferred ICT technology to around 6,000 local students. These numbers will keep increasing. Our commitment includes promoting digital inclusion and offering the equal access to ICT technology and also the ICT talent program. Huawei has been open to the world together with government partners, customers to build the ecosystem to reach our core value, innovation, collaboration, and contribution. Huawei will continue to support open collaborative standards and industrial organizations, contribute to a healthy and trusted global economy and industry. We also encouraged national government to promote free and fair digital competition. The future is bright. Huawei is proud to be part of ongoing success. Together with government, industry, and society, we will bring the digital to everyone, home, organization, for a fully connected, intelligent, and prosperous Mexico and also Latin America. Thank you, and muchas gracias.
Que no te escuchamos.
Okay, you mute.
Perdón. En efecto.
Yes, in effect. Sometimes when you are on live, you forget to unmute because you're so keen on what is being said. I will now give the floor to my dear friend, Fernando Rojas Mejia, who is the Senior Assistant for Economic Affairs at the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, but he is also one of the great promoters of the digital economy in Latin America. He is one of the imperative leaders in these topics when we talk about the digital economy and recovery. Please, you are welcome, Fernando. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank the organizers for their kind invitation. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Let me share my screen, if I may. And I will choose this option. Apparently I don't. Yes, here it comes. My presentation is going to refer primarily to a report that we have produced jointly between ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the European Union, CAF, the Development Bank for Latin America, and the OECD. And we call it the Latin American Economic Outlook. We call it LEO. And we are focusing on digital transformation in times of COVID. What the report does is approach digital transformation as an opportunity to close the structural gaps that the region has been facing for several years and that, of course, have been more marked during the pandemic. This digital transformation is affecting the trajectory of the world, but in Latin America, there is an opportunity to leap ahead and close this gap. In the document, we talk first about the economic context, and we see that the pandemic has hit our economy very hard, and we are going through one of the worst crises in history in the region with a fall of more than 9% GDP. We had never experienced one that marked. And on the other hand, we are facing the risk of a new decade of loss. The pandemic has arrived in a context of low growth, persistent inequity, and poverty in Latin America. And it is also reinforcing some vicious circles that were originated because of structural gaps. One of the specific impacts is the closing of 2.7 million formal companies. Most of them are micro companies, and this is going to lead to the loss of 8 million jobs. And poverty is going to reach almost 40%. 231 million people are going to be in situations of poverty, 96 million in extreme poverty. This is a very complex scenario, and we consider that technologies, digital technologies, can become a fundamental tool here. Here we see the structural gaps that I was referring to, and they are related to the topics of productivity, vulnerability, productivity, institutionality, and the environment. We understand that digital technology can help us to overcome these structural gaps, but in essence, through public policy that can be activated. We know that we cannot reach social well-being without reaching digital well-being. Now, what has been the evolution of digitization? This began basically with a digital nucleus, which was the development of the telecoms sector and for hardware and software. And this has given rise to the emergence of the digital economy, which in essence are those activities that are digitally native. Platforms, digital services, e-economy, and it has permeated the traditional economy, and what it is doing is generating digitized economy, incorporating digital technologies in traditional activities. And this digitization of the traditional economy is what has accelerated this context of the pandemic. Obviously, for this digitization in the traditional economy to generate more benefits than negative effects, We must develop this in an appropriate institutional framework with proper governance, and that is precisely one of the main topics that I will be dealing with today. Now, let me mention here and make a comparison of the risks and opportunities of digitization, which will be contingent on the type of policies that we adopt. In opportunities, we can do a productive upgrading and a structural change and achieve better quality of life, generate new job opportunities, develop skills and new sources of employment to include also transparency and institutional strengthening and decarbonization in the environment. The other side and the risks associated to these are concentration and polarization of production. That is, if we don't make digitization general, this may be concentrated in some segments and make the gap even bigger, the inequality gap and segregation for several segments of population that are excluded from digital services. Automation can generate greater levels of unemployment and risk in labor activities, and what we have already seen, the generation of fake news, the concentration of resulting power, data control, and issues and problems with privacy and cybersecurity, and an increase of the energy demand on the side of the environment. These are the two sides of the coin. Opportunities and risks. What are the crucial factors to achieve inclusive digitization that we can optimize opportunities? We need to consider all of these elements, the development of infrastructure, connectivity, including and improving digitization in homes and in productive processes, develop regulatory aspects in the right context, digital industry, production factors, and in general, we are lagging behind other OECD countries, particularly in production factors and digitization of industrial processes. Let's move to innovation now. And in innovation, there are several components that must be considered. For example, the development of human capital, the incorporation of technology, innovation itself, and investment. Since I don't have that much time left, I'm going to move forward very quickly, but I want to talk about the comparison in the resources and amounts that are allocated or earmarked for innovation in technology. 2.2% of GDP, investment in innovation, and in RD, public and private expenditure in Latin America, 2.2%. Another topic that is very important and is limiting digitization is the access gaps that exist in the region. One of the determinants are the levels of income in households. Differences in access levels in the quintiles, upper and lower income quintiles are more than 20 times. That is, the highest income have 20 times more opportunity to access digital services than those in the lowest ones, 20 times. On the other hand, we have the gaps in geographic regions. And here we have a comparison of several countries in the region who in recent years, we have seen growth in several of the countries. And now we also have the issue of gaps in digital skills. This we already see out there. We have witnessed it. Demand for skills associated to programming and IT is higher than the supply that we have of the same in the labor market. That shows us that there is room to close that gap between supply and demand of expertise. Now, regarding the manner in which we acquire active public policy, we must make sure that impact of the new technologies will not be neutral. They are linked to structural conditions, to employment, type of employment, productivity levels, the development of digital skills, and even the degree of international integration. All of this will limit the potential of digital technologies. Digitization is a facilitator of development, but it is not an end in itself. Without active policy, as we have seen, in opportunities and challenges, these might broaden the digital gap if we don't have proper policy in place. The pandemic has worsened the situation with digital policy, and we propose at LEO a digital integral focus with a cross-cutting tool for development policies. I've mentioned several times, this is a sectoral issue. Digitization is part of development policy. And lastly, let me mention that we also focus on international cooperation. Digital transformation is generating both challenges and opportunities that go beyond national borders. Global companies demanding cooperation for market development are going to have an impact on this cooperation. In this regard, we need a renewed model for international cooperation that will favor the transfer of technology and knowledge, and to create spaces for an exchange of experiences and good or best practices, and what we deal with, and that's the Secretary of ILAC at ECLAC, which is a space where I work and where we discuss and foster priorities in policies. Last week, I was at the ILAC meeting, and precisely there, we proposed and approved the new regional digital agenda through 2020-2022. And in that proposal, we're talking about the regional digital market, which can promote the economic development of the region precisely through optimizing on digital technologies. And I believe that I have now run out of time. I will be around and can share the link with you so that you can download this presentation. I thank you. Thank you indeed, Fernando Rojas Mejia, Senior Assistant for ECLAC. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm now going to give the floor to Leonardo Baldareskova, Director for Innovation Services and Interior Trade at the Ministry of Economy. The floor is yours, Leonardo. Good morning. Thank you all. It's an honor to be with you today. I thank you for the kind invitation for the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean to talk about what we are doing with the European Union, with Huawei, and with the group that is sponsoring this session. I am happy to greet my colleagues. It is indeed an honor to share this event with you, and I think that this is a very important session given the circumstances that we are experiencing in economic and social aspects as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Without a doubt, the abilities that we have seen to face something of this nature are due to the measures that have taken place in technology and information and communications in recent decades. Naturally, this represents something that is must be safe and efficient for all. In the scenario that we are experiencing, digitization becomes fundamental for us to continue with our activities. The COVID-19 pandemic has proposed and brought about greater social distancing. According to Google, at the peak of the pandemic in Mexico, which is what we're working on at the Economy Secretariat, we see a reduction of 72% of people attending places, and in entertainment places 72%, and what dropped the least was supermarkets and drugstores, but it still dropped 30% in people going to these places, and it has led to a change in consumer habits in the population. Speaking of Mexico, we have been able to remediate this given the progress that we have experienced in digital connectivity. The National Survey on the Availability and Use of Digital Information at our Statistics Institute of Mexico reveals that in Mexico, there are 80.6 million internet users, representing 70% of the population over the age of 6. And the country has 86.5 million users of cellular telephony, 65% of the population over the age of 6. According to Telecoms in Mexico, we have more than 120 million mobile cell lines and holding second place in Latin America. This availability of access offers a unique opportunity to have physical distance because of connectivity, including economic and social activities. Digitization and this availability to internet access has allowed us to find solutions to continue with our activities in a safe manner through our work. Telework has become the new means to deal with our economic needs and job needs, and for interaction and social aspects as well. The use of video conferencing, such as ours today, email, have substituted for physical meetings and written documents. Experts agree that this trend will be continued in the future with mixed or hybrid work systems at companies and generating a drop in transportation, use of transportation, and better quality of life for all of us. E-commerce has become a great ally for companies and consumers. In 2018, value added in Mexico rose to 75% of GDP, and Mexico was the one with the highest growth globally of online sales, with a 35 annualized % growth. Now, these were truly exploited. Mexico has experienced over 500% e-commerce or e-trade in certain areas. And this is due to the increase of use of internet and the greater use of connectivity through mobile devices, ease of payment, delivery of merchandise, and policies that have been functional and been put in place to protect consumers. In addition to internet penetration, the new technologies have allowed businesses to innovate in their business models and processes. According to the World Economic Forum, we estimate that 70% of the new value created in the economy during the next decade is going to be based on business through digital platforms. So quite clearly, innovation and the adoption of technology play a crucial role to foster an economic model through innovation and technology where we can increase competitiveness for our economies and achieve growth rates and generate quality employments that are acceptable for our societies. Connectivity, digitization, the digital economy have become fundamental aspects to face challenges and reactivate the economy. Data shows that in less than 2 years of digital transformation, we have concentrated just a few months of 2 whole years worth of digital transformation because of the pandemic. Data, information, know-how, and adoption of technologies and knowledge are the drivers of productivity, competitiveness, and growth. Data has become the most valuable asset in this economy. The reduction of storage costs and data processing has facilitated compilation of analyses of great volumes of information. According to the OECD, cloud computing, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and the analysis of mega databases are amongst the most important aspects of digital transformation, which brings with it the possibility of digitizing the entire value chain, reducing infrastructure costs, increasing the offer of goods and services through e-trade, growth in electronic transactions, and the digitization of everyday activities of individuals through connectivity. And this is expanding to all economic sectors and impacting various activities, allowing us to have innovation and new business models that generate more and greater products based on consumer need And we have a flexible configuration of services, adapting them to specific needs of clients at all times, developing an intelligent manufacturing system that will optimize resources and flexibility in productive processes, as well as having intelligent planning and logistics, integrating clients and suppliers and allowing for greater savings. So the truth is that this has been a change in the manner that we work. And clearly today, innovation in IT and communications play a crucial role, not just because of the growth potential, but the favorable aspect on other industries and on competitiveness in the economy. We are moving toward digital transformation where we must bring in a profitable manner new productive processes and technologies, optimizing on what exists already to store great volumes of data, where we can optimize on hyperconnectivity for the value chains. And in sum, these technologies based on the internet will allow us to be more productive and to better understand in timely manner the needs of our consumers and become more resilient as a society and an economy in light of threats such as COVID. If we know how to optimize these technologies, we'll be more productive and digitized trade, commerce will be more flexible, and we will see a general economic transformation. One of the lessons we have learned is the value of having these digital resources. IT and connectivity through the internet are clearly proving their value and worth for all of us. These are trends that are here to stay. Let's make of these a strength for our societies, and let's take this opportunity to leave this pandemic stronger. Thank you, Leonardo. Thank you for your participation. Now let's have Roberto Martinez Illescas, one of the digital thinkers in the region, director of the Huawei Center for Latin America. Roberto, you are recognized. Thank you so much, Jorge. It is a pleasure to see the faces of friends, Leonardo and others. And let me share my screen and show you a presentation that I hope will be enlightening, and it is regarding the OECD's recent report on Latin America economic perspectives, focusing on the digital transformation. So let's take a look at the analysis of where Mexico stands in the Latin American context in light of the digital agenda. Without further ado, I am sharing my screen here with you, and we see that it is important to understand this digital transformation in light of the serious effects of COVID-19 pandemic, which has been catastrophic. And as we have said from the heart of the OECD, the size of the economic harm of the pandemic is compared only to the destructive balance after the Second World War. And in the case of Latin America, in terms of GDP per capita in Latin America and the Caribbean, this is compared to a lost decade for Latin America and the Caribbean. I will stop with this now and let's delve into our topic. Something that we are seeing is two things: the primary importance of digital competitiveness, and the opportunity in light of the crisis is to take a quantum leap in Latin America and in Mexico. And if we have a holistic strategy in place, we can do this. And the second aspect is that the effects of the pandemic have exacerbated inequities, and this affects the most vulnerable more, bearing in mind that in Mexico as well as in Latin America, the level of the population that has access to social security is still very low. And this is going to leave a very important balance in vulnerable population. On the one hand, we have young people in addition to the elderly and that are vulnerable, and the companies and small companies have been the most hard hit disproportionately. because of the pandemic. Now, we see that the internet users the number has doubled in the recent decade, but there is still a lag, as the OECD informs. In Latin America and the Caribbean, which is the horizontal gray bar, we see the average of OECD in the blue line, and this talks about a significant gap in terms of the proportion of internet users comparing the periods in 2010 in orange and 2018 in the black line. We see the progress in Mexico, which has been significant in the last decade with new users for the internet. But despite the progress, connectivity speed is well below the world average. So what we have seen is spectacular progress in the speed of broadband in countries such as Korea and the United States, which is our main trade partner, and Spain and Chile in Latin America, that surpasses us greatly in the quality of broadband. So we do not have a sufficiently robust broadband. And despite that, we can see the lines down at the bottom. We continue to have at least sufficient broadband in Mexico, as in Colombia and the other OECD countries, for telework and streaming and for high definition and teleconferencing. So we are active here in the COVID pandemic. The impact of COVID in the region has been amplified because of the low use of digital means in everyday operations of companies. We see in the case of Mexico, 3 bars in the orange, those connected to the internet, and then the concentration who uses electronic connectivity. And in Mexico, it's not as low. That percentage is not as low. The orange, in the orange, we see the bluish bar, which is the percentage of companies that use internet to purchase their material. Mexico is at the lowest level, only matched by Ecuador and slightly below Peru. But the rest of the countries of Latin America, companies use the internet for the supply chain that they require to acquire supplies. We see that there is digitization that is still in a primary phase in the supply chains in Mexico, at least in the internal market in Mexico. Several countries of the region, more than 20% of jobs are at a high risk of automation. We see Mexico, job positions are at high risk of automation. In the case of Mexico, countries, because of their trade liberalization, we see that with the USMCA, Mexico has one of the highest rates of jobs or employment in the mid-complex manufacturing sector. So this is for Latin America, but we're also exposed to the risk of automation of these manufacturing processes. So Mexico is a country that is overexposed to the possibility and potential of job erosion because of robotics in the industry. This now leads us to avoid this so that there not be such a marked displacement of jobs through automation. It is imperative to act on the front of strengthening skills, digital skills in our population. So what we have here is adults without secondary education on the left, and those adults who have university education on the right, and their skills or competencies in informatic, in digital skills, in TICs, in ITCs, how countries like Chile, Mexico, and Ecuador, and the average of the OECD and Latin America shows a rate that is significantly higher than in OECD countries, but also higher in Chile as concerns the elderly who do not possess even the most basic skills in technology, and it's those adults who have not had access to higher education. Those who do have access to higher education or have had, Chile still has an advantage over Mexico as concerns adults with significant digital skills. And Mexico is still above Peru and Ecuador, nonetheless. Here there's an interesting slide because we see the black point and black dot and the black square and a line that shows the distance between education centers with and the black square, the ones that are least favored in the black squares, and we see the circle, which is in education or academic centers that handle population who are at greater economic advantage. So there is inequality between the black squares and the circles, reflecting inequality in optimizing on online learning. Now, this is not very encouraging. It is of concern. In Mexico, we have greater inequality than Brazil, Colombia, Panama, as concerns the gap between those who have the least and those who have the most opportunity to optimize on online learning. Here we see the development by UN of electronic governance or government, and there is still much to do. I'm closing now, and digital transformation demands comprehensive action so that we can have integral, holistic agendas based on digital transformation. There are several dimensions in these columns of what we consider at the OECD to be pillars of digital transformation: access, use, infrastructure of communications, the future of work, digital governance, digital economy, and regional integration. What we see here in the orange hues, the darker reflects the intensity with which the government have taken up each one of these pillars. In the case of Mexico, we see that there is not that much intensity, but greater intensity in terms of access and use, and then in regional integration. However, in very light orange, we have all of the other dimensions in Mexico, while there are countries such as Peru, Uruguay, for example, who are working hard on the future of work, and they have a national strategy for skills that we have been supporting at the OECD, and Paraguay has a very important regional integration approach. Uruguay is also very insistent on the future of work, and Brazil, which is a country that is approaching Mexico's indicators. They're working hard on connectivity, but they have also not made as many efforts in other areas. What is interesting is the digital agenda, which is crucial for the transformations that we see here. And we have institutional characteristics of national digital institutions and agendas in governance. Following the same orange shades, we see countries such as Brazil that underscores firmly all dimensions of the new specialized ITC ministry to have explicit objectives, express objectives in the digital agenda, public consultation, the Committee for Intergovernmental Coordination for the Digital Agenda to coordinate various interest groups and have goals or indicators to follow up on the digital agenda and to have a budget. Brazil is failing here. They have not set aside or earmarked a budget expressly for a digital agenda, but other countries do. Dominican Republic, Honduras, Paraguay, countries, and I'm very surprised they have set aside money for a digital agenda. In Mexico, there is a firm emphasis on the digital agenda and on public consultation to draw up a digital agenda. And relatively at the mid-level, we have a Ministry of Specialized ITC under the general coordination of the digital agenda. And there are indicators and goals for the digital agenda too. But I'm surprised to see that in Mexico, there is very small or non-existent emphasis on coordinating the interest groups to provide follow-up, and there is no coordinating committee at the intergovernmental level in place, and nor is there an express budget that has earmarked. There is one, but it is not the main focus of this overview of the national digital transformation. So a country like Colombia draws my attention. They have very good indicators in all dimensions, except in the coordination of the numerous interest groups for follow-up. So there are areas of opportunity on this chart, not just to drive a digital transformation agenda and public policy, but to make sure that public policy is going to be able to drive synergy and amongst the different endeavors and resources and be complementary beyond the budget alone. I close and I thank you for this opportunity, and I invite you to look at this Latin America Economic Outlook being translated into Spanish, talking about digital transformation for building back better our societies in light of the pandemic. Thank you so much, Roberto, for your presentation. It has revealed so much to us regarding knowledge and information. I'm going to give the floor now to a dear friend of digital projects in Mexico, the director of CAF in Mexico, Emilio Uquillas, representative of CAF, the development bank. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be able to be with you on this Digital Spotlight initiative, and I greet all members of the panel, particularly the people from Huawei, Mark, and others who are with Huawei. Certainly, the presentations that we have heard from the colleagues who spoke before me have been very enlightening and show that we have a great capacity for adaptation in light of COVID, using digital means that we have available and adapting and accelerating their use. Zoom, for example, before the pandemic, I personally had never heard of it, but through the pandemic, it has been an explosion in its domain, and zooming is even a verb now. Let's zoom. It's become a part of our grammar. So we have also concentrated in a short period of time technology. We were trying to do teleworking, but technology wasn't with us at that time. But suddenly in March of 2019, we started working from home, and things were adapted impressively. In 2020, I believe he means. There have been inequalities that have been made clear throughout the region, and I will talk about them further on. In general terms, in the world of development, we are speaking about digitization as if it were a fundamental tool to reach economic recovery, and we believe that it is necessary to exploit and use more that scaffolding that we have to render more systematic its benefits. We know that the digitization process has been highly accelerated and has had great impact on homes, states, production, consumer habits, and productivity. In consequence, to deepening our digital abilities. And here, let's look at financial deepening. We know that people need an account to have access to financial services, but we're missing something here when we talk about financial inclusion. It does not suffice to have a good amount of credit and savings regarding GDP to talk about inclusion or deepening inclusion in financial terms. We have to have users of financial services to master them, understand them, and use them fully. I think the same holds true for digital inclusion, for delving deeper into digital inclusion. It does not suffice to have network infrastructure to achieve digital inclusion. It is indeed a necessary condition, but it will not do it on its own. Let's take a look at what has occurred during the pandemic. Between 2000 and 2019, 240 million of new users in internet users. On the other hand, the number of companies with internet has moved from 77 to 91%. At the same time, we see 32 million children without access to teleschooling. Children between 5 and 12 years, 46 of the population of that population cannot do teleschooling. Nora Lustrick just wrote an article in the Americas Quarterly called Back to the 60s. That is, Latin America, in terms of education, is going back to the 60s. This is a latent threat that I think we must face. I think that this aspect of access to teleeducation is the tip of the iceberg and represents a phenomenon that is complex. 31% of the population does not have internet access, 49% of homes without internet connection, 56% of households without a computer, no computer. And the cost of broadband is between 10 and 14% of per capita income. That is more or less like the problem of drinking water. We have to build networks for drinking water to make it available. When you give a person access to drinking water that did not have piped water, you are at risk of generating public health problems, because if you don't have the proper infrastructure in place, the sewerage for that, and education and understanding to handle water that is coming into your home for the first time, then it won't be of much use if you don't know how to deal with it. We are facing a challenge of acting in 4 different fronts. One, actions for the development of the digital economy that will facilitate transformation. And in this, the productive processes, digital innovation, that is, increase the degree of digital complexity in companies, is fundamental, and the weight of digital industry. To talk about this, we must have a growing, burgeoning industry focused on developing digital products for the industry that already exists. The second is the development of local digital industries that offer platforms and applications and appropriate content in order to take off in this regard. Third, obviously, human capital. We have to prepare human capital in order to become a part of the digital world, such as Asian countries have done particularly, and a deployment of infrastructure that is very important, but is insufficient as yet. At the CAF Development Bank, we talk about 2 main aspects, and I think it is worth our while dividing them clearly. One is what we might identify as hardware, and the other is govware. In hardware, we are working on infrastructure, and one of the main axes of infrastructure at CAF is working in a cross-cutting manner with our objectives and our parameters that are strategic for management and in efficiency, equity, sustainability, institutionality, and integration that is in our DNA. And the agenda of all that is digital, from the development all the way through, goes through a priority aspect at this time. From there, we are working with an eye to developing quality infrastructure for connectivity. Digital infrastructure for transformation. What we need, as I have said, is connectivity in isolated remote areas. In Chile, for example, broadband users stand around 92% of the population at 2018. For this, we developed an important program that I talked about earlier, and I will go back to it, and that is Internet for All in Peru, the name of this program. This is important because through a partnership, private and multilateral, which includes Telefonica, Facebook, and CAF, we have been able to provide virtual and digital access to 30,000 rural locations in Peru, benefiting 6 million people in Peru, acting through a network of distribution. And we are also working on hardware in urban fiber optic, functional infrastructure, through roadways and through sewerage and water conduits. And in Mexico, this expansion of urban fiber optic we are working on with the Digital Agency for Public Innovation. And it has been truly a pleasure to help Mexico City in this. On the other hand, talking about GovWare, first of all, we have created a department for digital innovation for the state. And in the midst of the pandemic and COVID-19, we have been able to act in operations for supporting conceptualization and implementation of digital transformation for governments. We have rendered systematic this knowledge to support all governments who want to take this leap, this drive to become a part of the digital world. We have worked with the governments in light of the urgent and pressing need to create digital services in public services in an ongoing manner. That is, we have seen the limitations through the pandemic with curfews and with other measures. People have no longer been able to leave their homes. Governments have had to work very quickly to implement digital channels to offer services. We have seen that there is a path for great opportunity and support in this regard. Also, the implementation of public policies through data analysis. Let me tell you something about Mexico City, which has been one of our lines of action. Nonetheless, what is happening in GovWare? We have budgetary issues, and subnational governments and municipalities don't have sufficient budget as needed to expand digital services. Technical capacity, that is, here we're talking about human capital to be able to deal with digital aspects of governance, and a resistance to change, which is ever present, always there, resistance to change when there are sudden changes that come about. Here we see that within GovWare, GovTech represents a possible solution, an important one. GovTech is a system for the cooperation of startups and governments. That's what we have focused on, and that's how we envision it, incorporating data intelligence, digital technologies to resolve public problems. Now, we have done two things in this regard that are important as a rapid reaction or response for countries and the CAF partners, and we think that it's important to continue strengthening them. One is that the GovTech Lab platform, which is going to allow us to identify and quantify the state or status of development of the digital government and digital capabilities. In this regard, we have created the first index of GovTech in the world, because this index is new, and it is going to help us coordinate supply and demand with government and supply. And the good news is that in 16 countries that we studied in the region, Mexico holds 5th place in GovTech, which is good news because we see that there is fertile ground to continue growing digitally and help the country. On the other hand, we have carried out a patrimonial investment program in startups that are working with government precisely toward implementing technologies related to GovTech. Investment that we carry out is risk investment in small companies who have contracts or relationships with government for the development of tools. This gives them an injection of resources and capital where they can acquire a stronger financial muscle. We are also working with Digital Agency for Public Innovation in a system for public procurement, particularly procurement that is inclusive. It includes these small and medium enterprises of the country so that it can compete and offer services to the government of Mexico City Precisely. The good thing is that the government of Mexico City has developed this tool with open data and allows sharing this procurement technology with any subnational government, municipality, and not just Mexico, but in the region too, to improve transparency and competency. On the other hand, we have contributed also to the use of data science to understand the evolution of COVID here in Mexico City as well. As we can see, there is an important inroad that is being made in the digital world with very good response. But we must not leave aside and forget that there are people left behind, particularly children who will not be able to recover the lost time in terms of education. We have to exert an additional effort to include them in the digital world. On the other hand, it is insufficient to have a network infrastructure at the institutional level if we do not give people the know-how, the capability to use these digital tools. I would close having said this, and I hope that I have left some questions in the air for you. And I just wanted to tell you some information, but I wanted to propose some aspects that are pending regarding the recover of digital economy in light of COVID. Thank you all. Thank you, Emilio. I very much appreciate your thinking and the report that you have presented to us. I will now give the floor to Héctor Guerrero Herrera. He is the Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Mexico. Héctor, you are recognized. Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Good morning to all of you. On behalf of Mr. Alfonso Romo, Head of the Office of the Presidency of Mexico, and my own, we thank Huawei, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, the Strategy for Development and Transition, the Regional Instrument for the European Union, the National Telecommunications, ANATEL, and I thank you all for this cordial invitation to talk about the role of ITCs, and particularly the influence that this has on contributing to economic recovery of the country, particularly at this time in light of the health crisis and economic crises that we are experiencing due to COVID-19, where we have witnessed the need to adopt different tools, digital tools, that will favor primarily the continuity of economic and social activities. It is important to mention that at the head of the Office of the Presidency, we created the working group Digital Economy within the framework of the National Committee for Promotion of Investment, Jobs, and Economic Growth, called FINESE. We have set up important synergy with different stakeholders in the federal public administration, industry, and academia to diagnose primarily the current situation of the digital economy in Mexico and propose solutions. As a result of this working group, we have identified in this ecosystem, this digital ecosystem, diverse challenges and areas of opportunity that we are facing as a country. On the other hand, there are also certain aspects that are a result from the pandemic and that mandate us, obligate us to execute solutions immediately. This reactivation for the economy and to support the digital transformation of micro, small, medium enterprises. Let me mention some endeavors that have been carried out in this joint manner with the industry and the federal government. This in order to face the crisis generated by COVID-19 and with the participation of this working group on digital economy. One of these, the program Taking Care of You Through the Internet. This is an initiative of the Internet Association whose objective is the digitization of small establishments and companies. The solidarity in the market is another endeavor led by the Ministry of Economy with the purpose in mind of promoting local consumption, allowing the small merchant and company to announce its business through a portal so that the user of the platform can access the information and request service, delivery service. GIAS is another program together with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Economy, the Office for Consumer Protection, and companies that do home delivery services, logistics and departmental, as well as with the stakeholders of the restaurant and pharmaceutical enterprises. We developed a guide for safe home delivery for all and the guideline for preparation and delivery of orders that contains suggestions to continue throughout the different links of the chain of e-commerce in safety. We are duly convinced that cooperation between the multiple stakeholders has favored strengthening collaborative actions that will strengthen the digital ecosystem in Mexico. In this regard, the role that access to internet plays is of the essence. I agree with the last national survey regarding availability and use of technologies and information in households. In Mexico, it states that there are 80.6 million internet users that represent 70.1% of the population of the country that are 6 years of age or older. In like manner, the telecoms sector has high value in the economy of our country because it contributes 3.1% of national GDP. In addition to being a cross-cutting market to many others, where it is possible to move within the ecosystem of the digital economy. In this regard, digitization of micro, small, and medium enterprises turns out to be very important for our country because according to our National Statistics Institution, e-commerce contributes 65% to national GDP. In 2019, SMEs contributed in a great amount to GDP, and there were 6.3% establishments with 36.3 million people holding jobs. Without a doubt, these small and medium enterprises are very important, and it is imperative for them to become digitized as soon as possible because according to the figures of our statistics, 1 out of every 5 establishments of an SME will have and has online advantages. The use of internet for e-commerce to order products is 22.1%. For bank operations online, 16.8%, and for sales through internet representing 9.3%. Of the 54 million people who have a financial product, 23.1% million do not have online banking service. In Mexico in 2019, 19.3% of people between the age of 16 and 74 carried out online purchases. In this regard, we analyze the digital economy in 5 different areas. 1, financial digital inclusion. 2, reliability and trust in the digital environment. 3, the development of SMEs. 4, promoting e-commerce. And 5, the development of digital skills. Consequently, we see that incorporating all technologies of information and communications generate greater competitiveness and competency in people and companies by bringing closer our traditional markets to digitization, having greater income, and finding in this new opportunity a manner of expediting the dynamics of the different economic activities of our country, being technology our best ally for economic integration. It is not by chance that the largest companies in the world through a greater capital are technology companies, including Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, and Huawei, amongst others. In the federal government in Mexico, we are duly convinced that for now, we must undertake 3 actions. 1, promote incorporation of ITCs in productive processes. 2, innovate constantly, both in government as well as private enterprise. And 3, link benefits of the digital economy to the needs of the most vulnerable population to achieve social well-being. Thank you so much. There are many challenges that we face, and assuredly many alternatives and solutions that we will find along the path, and that we are entirely certain of. It has been, for the office of the President of Mexico, a pleasure to address you and share this space with you. Without further ado, on behalf of Mr. Alfonso Romo Garza, head of this office, I reiterate our congratulations for this extraordinary exercise. I thank you. Thank you, Hector. Very revealing report that you have just presented, and we appreciate it. And in effect, a good part of the efforts for communication and reflection of the speakers are in this regard to find opportunities that Mexico has to turn and strengthen in the world of digital economy and society. So we have left for the last the floor to a dear friend, a man who, in addition to being a civil servant, is a true digital thinker, one who trusts technology, who has understood challenges in terms of digital transformation in his country, and who has made public policy and has seen opportunities like we have in Mexico. And I think that the building of public discourse and public policy is not something new. Technology evolves, and so does public policy, as it must, hand in hand with technology. That is what is passionate, and that is the enormous challenge that we face in Mexico and Latin America, building public discourse appropriately to better use technology and to provide digital well-being for our citizens. So let me introduce Vice Minister of Telecoms of Colombia, Ivan. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Jorge, and warm greetings to you, Ivan Antonio, the private sector, all of the authorities, ECLAC, OECD, everybody who is present here today. Let me share very quickly my screen with you to share some slides with you. Very well. We can see the presentation here. Now, it is my turn to speak, and it's going to be very difficult. And I have nothing further to say, but let me share with you the experience from my standpoint and from the Colombian case as I see it. And we have seen in the presentations preceding us that reflect what is happening in Latin America, concretely in Mexico. The first thing, as we said in our presentation, I think that in Colombia and in Latin America, due to economics effect, due to COVID. And if we compare this to the GDP, we have seen that we are moving backwards several years. The GDP per capita back 10 years, and the GDP in Colombia, the total that we see is some 7 or 8 years. And this fosters a challenge in this important for the economic from our mindset, economic situation, are going to find new sources of economic growth, not just the traditional ones, but things that we are experiencing. You're going to find this particularly in the challenge that we're facing, because in an increasingly globalized economy where what happens in the country affects everybody and what happens elsewhere affects other countries, we must pioneer and move forward and always not just take the last figure that we have available, but focus on the future and on the engine that is going to drive this. For example, in the labor market, let me show you some figures that also reflect and are equivalent in each country. The economic effects of this pandemic led to a halt in generating jobs, and the occupied population of the country. In this case of in Colombia, in the last quarter, we have experienced improvement, and once again, in the occupied population, but we consider that there is still much to do and a path before us. So how do we employ people? That's the question. One of the possible economic effects that the pandemic has left us. How can we produce jobs? And because of the time that it's going to take to recover, jobs are going to be lost even more quickly than what we had thought initially. So in this light of this new opportunity of finding how to generate jobs for people is what we talked about a moment ago, and that is economic growth. And when we look at economic growth, we must remember that a country grows in general terms due to three elements: physical capital, where we have major investments in infrastructure, for example, ports and highway systems and telecoms and hydrocarbons and energy, etc. Capital investments exist in all of our countries. In Mexico, Colombia, we have developed at an accelerated pace in recent years, and the space for growth begins to shorten. A second element for growth, which is what has to do with the labor force measured by the number of people who are working and hold jobs compared to the number of people who can work in a country or are in condition of working. In case of Colombia, that approaches 60% if we compare it to more productive economies, more developed, such as the United States. This percentage of 65 to 70%. That is, there's room for growth economically in this second variable in Colombia, but it is shortening, it is lessening. The third element for growth in a country is productivity. Total productivity of the factors is what it is known as. And so to bring it down to a few words, all this has to do with how a country optimizes on its resources to produce more and have quicker turnaround. And there we see on this graph, not just in Colombia, but in Latin America, we have an enormous opportunity to grow and kick off our economy and to guarantee growth in the mid and long term. Now, what we have seen at this time is that this is changing at an accelerated pace. And here, inclusion of technology in a cross-cutting manner, according to the OECD report, is of the essence. It is fundamental. The challenge here is not just connecting, but connecting quickly and including people quickly and in an equitable, fair manner across all of our latitudes and geographies and countries. We have carried out an analysis for Colombia. This is our graph that shows the relationship between the internet penetration and the download speed for people who are living in poverty, measuring each one of our regions in Colombia, which we call departments. We have 32 departments. We see the graph on the right. To the degree that internet penetration increases in one of our departments, there is a ratio reducing the level of poverty. Saying this in easier terms, when a person has access to internet, they have greater or infinite opportunities opening up, opportunities for new sources of income and for finding jobs. And the same holds true When you have access to higher quality internet, I think ECLAC showed us this, when you have greater quality internet, then it is also important not just to include people in the digital ecosystem, but through a mechanism for broadband access, very speedy broadband access, which also increases average speed. As it increases, it reduces poverty in the different departments of our country. We have found that in the case of Colombia, in the aggregated download speed of the country, it can increase in up to 1.6 GDP per capita. We're talking about economic recovery and the effects of this pandemic. We find a graph here that I think is very important, a McKinsey graph. It's a recent one that shows how we have seen an increase in online purchasing and consumerism. Prior to the pandemic, measured up to just 1 or 2 months ago, it's very recent. We find that basically all products, online consumer purchases has increased significantly. And I think that in addition to this, that shows us that our economic structure is changing beyond COVID-19 and its effects, where sometimes we tend to think that we're all going to be locked up forever and buy forever on the internet. I think that there is an in-depth reason. This is the fact that we have realized that buying via internet is cheaper, it generates less effort, you can find better offers, and the time that we use in shopping, we can dedicate to other types of activities. And that change, that trend in the manner in which we consume digitized economy, and I agree with this, that at first Ernesto talked about, leads us precisely to now changing our mindset, our chip regarding public policy and digital agenda in our countries. There are 4 levels where we can structure digital agendas. We have material access down at the bottom where we have all of the policies, economic sectoral policies, fiscal policies, and public policy that then leads us to material access where we have policies and projects to develop greater coverage, improvements in services, internet, mobile internet, to render mass used all services mobile. And we have a 3rd level where we have other types of interests here to exploit access to digital services in pro of benefits for people. And lastly, a 4th layer of integration where through the digital ecosystem and transformation in transforming things from the traditional way, we call this the digital transformation. It is nothing more than transforming our development models, our economic, productive, and social development models. Lastly, we have improvement of all of these aspects that will lead to digital agendas, because historically in our countries we had approached solutions to these problems in a sequential manner, stemming from the bottom of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid. Countries where for many years we had regulations and things in place. We were talking about closing the digital gap, which is the 2nd level. And one of the important messages, at least from my theoretical standpoint, is that manner of producing digital agendas and the challenge that we face now for all of us attempting to do this is to try to produce agendas that recognize this pyramid in an integral manner, comprehensive, that approaches solutions and challenges at all 4 levels of development. For this, evidently, as of now and in the coming years, we are all facing a challenge, and that is to begin transforming digital agendas for integral economic agendas for all countries that will allow us to increase our levels of productivity, to find new sources of economic growth and generate jobs, and arrive at the end of the day at what we want, and that is improving the quality of life for people, improving income, And these are our goals in all sectors of the economy. Let me close with 3 slides. They're very simple slides, but they show us some concrete examples of what we are talking about here. In Colombia, we have an integral digital agenda that we adopted from the beginning of our administration, not just regarding access and social inclusion to ITCs, but an agenda that integrated digital transformation. The first thing that has to do with connectivity, we've been able to develop different strategies that lead to a reduction of costs in telecoms, because it became a facilitator of all activities that today we can find in a digitized economy. And this evidently has changed our mindset, our chip in carrying out public policy in Colombia. For example, looking at pricing for the entire spectrum, generating greater competency and greater incentives for reaching investors in our country and deploying infrastructure to reach all households. Everything that we have done and we have seen in these really good presentations, if we don't close the digital gap in all of our countries, there will be people left out in the cold, disenfranchised. So social development and economic development opportunities need to arrive to all. In Colombia, we're very proud to say that regarding the auction for the spectrum last year, let me show you how Colombia will move from a country basically that was disconnected in rural areas to a broadband mobile 4G country, at least in 80% of our entire national territory in under 4 years. And that is not sufficient. It's a great historic achievement for Colombians, and we're very proud of it. And that's why I'm sharing this. And at every event I go to, this is a project that has given us hope. But if we don't build other policies and put actions in place that are strategic and concrete, then this discourse is going to be left as something interesting for good conversations. That is why we have recently produced documents that will talk about integral public policy that brings in all members of our society. And these are documents and policies and plans of action that can be understood as state policy that we have to comply with and beyond current administrations as well. And so I will share 3 achievements with you in our national public policy for digital transformation and artificial intelligence that has been underway for 1 year. And it optimizes on connectivity and generates benefits for our economy and for the government as well. A second policy that we have issued just recently is the National Policy on Trust and National Security in a digitized environment. These policies are going to change and recognize that our social, cultural, economic interactions are in a digital environment now. And now, just out of the oven, as we say, is the National Policy on e-commerce. Our consumer habits, everything that is going on recognizes that we have to transform the way we do things. Regulation, which we have understood as independent, that only was observed by one sector of the economy, a digital telecoms sector, needs much more comprehensive focus, not just on platforms, but focusing on services that are increasingly digitized. That regulation has to encompass every aspect, and the entire process for transformation towards the digital citizenry that we're working on. We have launched the first phase already, and evidently I close here leaving with you a message, and that is that in effect what we are experiencing opens up 2 paths before us in Latin America. The first, we have to choose. The first is just look at how others are moving forward and jump on the wagon. Or the second, which is my message to you, is look at what opportunities you have out there and move with speed, be expeditious, so that we ourselves can build our own future, and Latin America may start thinking about not just being a passenger in the last wagon of the train, but be at the front of the train. Thank you, Ivan Mantilla. We are now reaching the end of this panel sessions, but I have two thoughts that I would leave with you. First, Mark Shui, representing Huawei, we thank you. Edwin Fernando Rojas from CEPAL, thank you. Hector Guerrero from the Office of the President of Mexico, Eduardo Alvarez, thank you. Roberto Martinez Illescas, Director for the Mexican Center, thank you. Emilio Uquilla, Representative of CAF, Ivan Martilla, Vice Minister for Colombia, thank you all. Because in each one of your talks, we have found concern, but we have also seen revealed the opportunity that digital transformation opens up for us. In each one of the texts that you presented, technical papers and texts that reflect a great lot of work agree that digital transformation is one of the biggest challenges that we face in our civilization and in our generation. And this opens up enormous opportunities for our societies and our countries. What you are talking about here is that in light of adversity and crisis like we are experiencing, to design new public policy is a good thing. To design creative processes that transform citizens and companies and public administrations is positive. I thank you. It is an optimistic message we have heard from each one of you. We can understand this as technical technology, software, digital, intelligent communications networks. All of these together generate well-being, and they represent fundamental rights for citizens. And the challenge that we are facing is fighting digital disenfranchisement. Thank you for your messages. They were absolutely splendid. And now I'm going to give the floor to the keynote speaker, Cesar Fules, and I warmly welcome Cesar Funes. Cesar, technical innovation and economic recovery. The floor are yours, Cesar. You are recognized, and I thank all panelists. Cesar Funes. Thank you, Jorge. Hello to all, and it is a pleasure to have heard such important references from our panelists who proceeded with the conversations before me. I would like to share my screen and show you what we at Huawei are seeing regarding the digital economy. I have it here now, and I will upload it full screen. In the few minutes that we have to be with you, let me share with you how we envision digitization as a driver for cooperation too. In all aspects that the previous speakers talked about, we saw this. Let me begin by underscoring what economists around the world have clearly discussed, as said Vice Minister for Colombia, Mantilla. Practically all economists around the world agree with two things. The economic impact is very significant, and recovery is going to take a very long time. Important endeavors as well. What they also agree on is that we have to have an important approach on investment to ensure that investment be in digital infrastructure. Infrastructure, yes, but specifically digital infrastructure. And why are we saying this? Because it has been proven through different studies that investment, stimulus centered on investment, represents the greatest fiscal multiplier compared to others such as consumerism, which is important to reactivate consumerism, as well as taxation and resources, so that all of this can foster multiplication. But precisely the multiplier, the tax multiplier and fiscal multiplier in investment in digital technology, as some studies have shown, for example, the European Commission. This is going to reflect impact in the short term, but also in the mid and long term. In study from the shows that G 2.5% compared to others that are approaching 1. Important to underscore, as we have heard through our previous speakers, how important it is to establish a digital agenda and strategy. Clearly, we have to take multiple examples. For example, the European Union, Korea, Germany, our economies already had a digital foundation laid, and they have decided to, let me underscore the case of China here, that has dedicated 43 trillion yuans just to invest in an emerging manner in 7 different sectors, within which 5 or 4 are specifically allocated to investment in digital infrastructure, 5G, big data, industrial internet, artificial intelligence. Also, something that Roberto Martinez from the OECD mentioned. Precisely in this regard, Huawei decided to establish a study, to undertake a study, together with the consultant Afrodeling, with a different approach, an approach where the formula for success is not from the perspective of one size fits all, rather understanding the impact of government actions and policies in a cross-cutting manner for the entire economy, and not just for those sectors that are directly involved in infrastructure, digital infrastructure. In this regard, this study sought out, based on experience and analyses of information of nearly 200 countries, we were able to map and compare where each one of these regions stood within the value chain of digital infrastructure. And we discovered that there were 7 archetypes. The 7 archetypes identify more or less the countries from the perspective of what the dominant factor is in the creation of value for the ITCs. The other axis shows us consumption. We were able to note that we could group together in 7 different systems. For example, those who have a strategy that is fully entering the ITCs, we call the newcomers. Those who have a vocation with manufacturing, those who are focusing on digital business, and those of us who are constantly working in digitization, either through producing products and services or consuming products and services efficiently. We call these the prosumers, efficient prosumers. And that obviously is those who have become innovators, those countries that have been leading because they have strong innovation capabilities. So we produced some examples of the 200 countries, and we looked at the countries that might have moved further ahead or have identified within each one of these archetypes. We also agree with what we heard from the CAF Development Bank, where the stimuli for investment is important. And we were able to identify some countries, in the case of Mexico, which clearly has a calling and labor that is high skilled. So we could call this an advanced global manufacturer, like Malaysia is. Brazil has identified as part of the group of countries that is a power in services, and others like Colombia as the Vice Minister Mantilla showed us, have a strategy in place that is highly focused on driving the digital agenda. In this regard, what we have seen is that there are some policies that we have been able to identify together with the ADL study. There are many policies that we can attempt to promote, but what we found were four important groups: technology, the ecosystem, the capacity of the countries, and the development of industries. Within all of these multiple public policies, we have presented 23, which are clearly identified as being a part of technology, but equally important, the development of capacities. And let me underscore here that amongst all our countries in Latin America, some, as we have already heard, that are powers in services, others in global manufacturing, others that are fully entering in the ITCs now, newcomers, we think it's important to underscore that we should emphasize the approach of emerging technologies, the onset. Much importance has been given to how many people have access to internet, how many households have access to broadband internet. Let me say, broadband makes the difference between access to internet and access to digital economy. That is the difference. Today, access to internet provides a lot of information. It helps us at first to begin taking off in certain services in digitization, but broadband is what makes the difference. And this was mentioned by Mr. Mantilla, the Vice Minister for Colombia. In the short term in Colombia, they are going to reach 80% coverage. 4G is the basis to have for a country to become 5G, and 5G is going to add a lot more capability and connectivity and low latency, which will allow us to have intelligent manufacturing take place. Other countries such as Mexico has made good progress in the 4G coverage and possibly between 60 and 70%. Without a doubt today, and the possibility of achieving that percentage in the short term, according to what we are seeing. So it's important for those public policies to allow us to deploy infrastructure much more expeditiously and to make inroads here, to have a lot the focus on an digital education program in a cross-cutting manner. This is part of the development of the ecosystem to make sure that we can have digital education programs as the basis for our work. And here, this is one of the factors in this bright green, one of those 3 of the 7 archetypes that we identified as what we want to attain. Innovation, a prosumer that is innovative, a prosumer that can have a production chain of digital services, but also consumers as a consumer and the benefits that this represents precisely because they're more efficient, and this opens up the possibility of having new business models. Today, regrettably, because of the pandemic, but thanks to the pandemic, to a certain degree, the penetration of the digital concept in people is reaching us in an accelerated manner. We have heard of this concept of creative destruction. Fortunately, this pandemic has also led us to open up our minds and try to find new business models or render more powerful some that exist to be better efficient, with better efficiency for not just the future, but for the economy of the present. But the economy of the future is that economy which is going to provide inclusion of the entire society, both to economy, to finance, as well as to digital aspects. And the third topic is to continue driving, as I said at the beginning, inclusion Digital inclusion through investment in infrastructure. Digital infrastructure will be the driver for economic recovery, optimizing this impetus. Take advantage of interinstitutional cooperation. Working with the government is crucial, together with members of the industry, and together moving forward with the digital economy to reach many more people. With this, I would like to close my participation and something that Leonardo Alvarez from the Ministry of the Economy said, the importance of data. Data is the new oil. So digital infrastructure is the new pipeline. Thank you for this opportunity.
Si hay alguna pregunta, estoy disponible para responderla.
If there are any questions, I am available to answer them.
¿Qué tal? Continuamos.
Hello, we are ready to continue on Digital Spotlight, COVID and economic recovery based on the digital transformation of connectivity. We will kick off our first panel on innovation and economic recovery. And very quickly with us is my friend Roberto Martinez Illescas, Director for the OECD Center in Mexico. Welcome again, Roberto. Maria Eugenia Perez, Secretary for the Committee on Science and Technology at the Lower Chamber of Mexico. Hermamino Camacho, Commissioner for Telecoms. Ramiro, welcome for the Federal Institute of Communications. Sergio Fernandez Vargas for the state of Hidalgo, and my friend Marco Antonio Galvan, proprietor of Futurist Thinking and Vice President of Venture Capital and Artificial Intelligence at KP Maine. Thank you, Marco Antonio. Let us begin very quickly, particularly because of time constraints, because my friend Roberto Martinez has a tight schedule. Roberto, opportunities to recover the economy as of the digital transformation and times of crisis. Thank you, Jorge. In effect, the opportunity is unique. In rebuilding what has been damaged through the pandemic. The damage is great in Latin America. The GDP per capita has gone back to levels we saw at 2009. This is terrifying. So this represents the countries of our region, and the damage has been very tough because of the millions of companies that have closed, micro and small enterprises particularly, and lost jobs. for those, we know that this loss of jobs is terrible, leading to exponential precariousness, and those who have joined the long lines of the unemployed. But even so, the underemployment or subemployment is also an issue we're facing. To avoid this shock that we are entering into now, that is very destructive, as I said, we need to maximize digital skills for people. We need to make inroads in digitization of companies. We need to optimize the power of digital tools so that we can avoid gaps becoming even larger, the gaps that we have recognized for decades. Digital access is one of them, and connectivity gap is another one of them, regarding broadband capabilities and the ubiquity of connectivity. Connectivity is insufficient when the population does not have digital skills. So we have to insist on digital education, but at the same time, there are things that take on much more importance, such as training of the job force, retraining of people who have been endangered here, so that they can once again join the economy in a less risky or precarious manner. And in this regard, the OECD data has indicated that there are two fronts to work on. One is digital skills of the population and reducing vulnerabilities, which has hit women and young people much harder. And on the other hand, the second one is to carry out an additional effort, not just to make sure that these SMEs don't die out and asphyxiate, but to bring them closer to tools, digital tools, and options for retraining of the job force, and naturally investing in employability centers, places where they can find jobs. And these are places that we have worked at in the OECD to help people who have been left out in the cold to find jobs and employment, but do so in a different manner that will be less precarious. That is another one. And there's an additional front before I close my comment, and that is to understand that this is not a matter of additional agendas. Rather, this is comprehensive transformation agendas. Transformation is the main word here. So we need to transform what there was, improve it, and looking at it from a multidimensional approach, where all of the agencies of public policy must be coordinated in a cross-cutting manner, and be able to embrace the ITCs, although there are other aspects that are important too, and also coordinate stakeholders, not just those in government, to make sure that this is a shared endeavor between private, public sector, academia, organized society, so that we can add in real content and bring down to earth national agendas and make sure that they reflect daily needs, living on a daily basis in a personal endeavor, a business effort, for allowing me to share these comments with you. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you indeed. Let's talk to Maria Eugenia Hernandez, Congresswoman. You have one of the most wonderful jobs, because you are presiding at the Committee for Science and Technology at the lower chamber of Mexico's Congress, and the Information Society, innovation, all of the different topics that you touch on from the legislative standpoint, and working to think of new legal frameworks, new regulation that comes from science and technology, telecoms. And this is a time, Congresswoman, where we understand that the digital world will help with the economy, but also to preserve fundamental rights to health, access to culture, education. So it's a good time to start rethinking legislative aspects in this regard. What is your opinion and your vision about this juncture that we are experiencing? First of all, I greet you all. I greet all attendees, and I thank you for the kind invitation to share with you on this Innovation and Economic Digital Economy Forum. There is much to discuss here, and the exponential technological time that we're living in. I thank the organizers of this event for the invitation. I thank all panelists who spoke before me, given the wonderful ideas they shared. At the lower chamber, I am the Undersecretary for the Science of Technology and Innovation Committee, and we are studying many initiatives and bills to create a legislative environment that will be dependent on the legal framework for these new technologies. The pandemic left us a very clear idea of the weaknesses and strengths that we have in this country. In Mexico, for example, the fundamental weakness is that we reached the fourth industrial revolution late. We came into the game late. And now with the health emergency and the emergency of health in Mexican citizens, there are many efforts being carried out right now, but the need to reactivate the economy and continuity of activities have triggered an increase in the digital economy, such as telework and digital commerce and the generation of new technological solutions. All of this is going to demand a legal framework that we must embrace. We need to endorse it where it is that we can receive more assistance. While it is true that we are late to the game, the problems that we see arriving here, for example, the Mexican population and its access to work, there is still like artisanal work in Mexico, and we were not prepared as yet for what happened with the pandemic, with these new technologies. We would have to re-educate workers and activate them in these new technologies. And we know that this is going to be very important as a challenge in Mexico, and that we have to re-educate, we have to prepare new technologies, we have to make sure that technologies, because they're already here, people have to embrace them. We must legislate, therefore, in this regard. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Commissioner Ramiro Camacho, the truth is that this is a major opportunity that we are facing here. As commissioners, you particularly, sir, this is the time to reveal the major opportunities that there are to generate a good amount of well-being for our societies. And part of that work is up to you. You are not just technicians in regulatory issues. You are digital thinkers. You are people who have embraced a vision for society. And the pedagogical effect of what you say is very important, Ramiro, because you are the ones who know what technology comprises and what well-being it can generate. And going into the world of economy, what does digitization for citizens provide for us? Ramiro. Thank you, and hello, everybody. First, I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me to take part at this event, and I greet all of the attendees. In my point of view, digitization is the new driver for economic growth. And at its time, we had the train, we had electricity, we had the printing press come into play with cross-cutting effects on productivity, each in its own moment in history. Spillovers, what we call them, how they go across all sectors of economy with their benefits. And it is these effects that are accumulated to new developments, and these effects that last for decades and entire cycles. Just look at how long the effects of Gutenberg's printing press have lasted. So we're at the beginning of a very long-lasting process, which will have many effects on productivity and on the well-being of the population. Not just that, not just the effects on the market for goods and services, but also for the public sector, which is very important. We're talking also about effects on the self-same organization of society and how it is that humans perceive themselves to be and how we interrelate. And in this pandemic, what we have seen is a situation that is crucial regarding health. And in economic terms, too, with the shutting down of SMEs and the loss of jobs. But beyond all negative aspects, which have been many, I recognize, I think that there is an opportunity to think more, think about the discussion at the public level, and people who in the past had no idea of how to organize a video conference or a WebEx and are now used to doing this type of thing. So I think that there is a small change in the generalized mindset of people that might be useful to make inroads in a general change and providing greater impulse to the adoption of digital technologies. On my part, as part of the regulators for telecoms group, our role is one of being the agent that is going to seek and ensure that these processes are carried out efficiently. And of course, there are important matters of access and rendering technologies internal for companies and for the state within legal frameworks. All of these are important aspects, but from the standpoint of our department, we are working on facilitating legal certainty, granting legal certainty for investors, which is of the utmost importance, and the quality of regulation. Certainty and quality. We want to encourage, and this is something we have been doing for several years and will continue to do, encourage fixed and mobile investments, fiber optic as well, release more spectrum, and implement novel systems for broad use of the spectrum, including sharing the spectrum, and something else that is very important, which is collaboration with different orders of government to guarantee deployment. For example, local governments to not have any obstacles to the deployment of the new infrastructure. And regarding competency, we are highly committed in regulation in avoiding anti-competitiveness conduct. Our work is not just limited to the traditional telecom sector, but also expands to new services and digital applications in which there may be a need for technical and economic regulation ex ante, which will resolve market shortcomings, through coordination, and the policy for competence, which is an ex post policy, which is referred to sanctioning antitrust or anti-competitiveness actions and the resulting problems. I would stop now. Thank you, Ramiro, Commissioner for the Federal Institute of Telecoms in Mexico. Sergio Vargas, you heard a moment ago in the papers offered by the studies that we heard in our previous panel, CAF, ECLAC, OECD, and more, that we're talking about a new generation of digital agendas that would be cross-cutting, but also vertical. And I would also add local, federal, and municipal. What we now need is for the states of the country to take up leadership roles in collective matters. Have you thought that just federal governments and agendas are the ones that tend to resolve matters of connectivity? But now we understand that it's not the case. We must have the support of the different states and municipalities in doing this. The state of Hidalgo that you represent surprised us, not just in Mexico, but in Latin America, because your state embraced decisions for regulatory improvement to transform the investment environment. And so I would like to hear you talk about this and what your vision is in a local aspect for society at the state level. Thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you for the invitation to this important forum. And thank you for allowing me to greet the people who are joining us on this panel. And I fully agree, and I would like to cite something very important that the commissioner just mentioned, Ramiro Camacho, when he said how it is that we can ensure that municipalities facilitate permits and coverage for telecoms. And why is it that in our state, we have embraced this path and become a model to emulate, not just in the rest of Mexico, but throughout Latin America? What we realized from the beginning of the administration, Governor Meneses, is that we needed development for all communities and municipalities. We know today that telecoms today is the most powerful tool to generate social equality, to guarantee access to information, health, and education. If there is no access in telecoms infrastructure at the ground level, municipal, rural level, then the citizens of those areas are not going to have access to those rights, and they will not have access to those great benefits that are entailed in telecoms. If we look at data from INEGI, our statistics department, 80% of urban households have access to broadband internet, and 14% of rural households only do. In Mexico, there is a fixed access, and 50% do not have fixed access. We studied why there was no access at the municipal level, and what we observed, as the commissioner mentioned, and the Congresswoman did too, we realized that there were access barriers. Telecoms companies were able to see that it was extremely difficult to reach a municipality and obtain a permit to set up fiber optic and set up an antenna that was going to allow radiation to the rest of the community, radiate it, and provide the telecom or television service. It was so hard to do this and so extremely discretionary that at the end of the day, telecoms operators withdrew their investment, and this became a vicious circle. There was no regulation that was expeditious at the municipal level. Therefore, telecoms were not representing the interest in investing, and they couldn't obtain permits in due time. And so we continued to not have telecoms coverage, and the population did not have access to the important tool that is a social equalizer. So what we did was, through the instructions from the governor, we set our house in order. We carried out a regulatory reform where all municipalities, in a standardized, homogeneous manner, were granted permits, because we know that it is imperative to development, and they were granted permits in no more than 7 days in a transparent, streamlined manner, and allowing telecoms operators to invest safely. Once we were able to implement this model, what we noted was that there was a significant increase in telecoms investment, 63% increased telecoms investment in the municipalities of Hidalgo once we adopted the model, the reformed regulatory model. And I agree, Jorge, today digital agendas have to be discussed not just nationally, but rather from the local and regional mindset, because at the end of the day, that is where investment takes place, at the local and regional levels. And certainly in terms of economic recovery, I do believe that this pandemic made it clear that at the local level, we urgently need to adopt and digitize micro and small and medium enterprise, but also we need to digitize citizens. I fully agree with what Roberto Martinez from OECD said. We need an agenda that is local and regional if we are to render literacy, provide literacy for citizens, digital literacy, so that they can know how to use and optimize on telecoms. But at the same time, if we don't think about how we can facilitate telecoms and infrastructure in an expeditious manner, we will be unable to achieve all citizens reaping the benefits of this tool. And certainly in Hidalgo, we are very enthusiastic about telecoms as a fundamental tool for economic recovery in the coming months. We have noted this particularly in those sectors of SMEs that, due to the nature of their sector, are dependent primarily for income on the flow of persons, which of course is not happening today because of the pandemic. So we needed to generate an e-commerce digital platform so that all of those SMEs could survive through alternative sales channels. This is primary and of the essence. We noted at the local level in Hidalgo that what these SMEs they didn't know how to use them. They didn't know how to use the digital commerce channels or the tools in order to sell and survive as businesses. So something else that we have to understand immediately is that the USMCA chapter, a brand new chapter in the free trade agreement, that talks about digitization of SMEs. I think that we came late to the game and realized late that not only is it necessary to have digital infrastructure and digitize citizens and companies, but that it is pressing, that it is urgent to do so, not just to recover financial and economically, but also to participate in the 4.0 industry, where we're going to have to work hand in hand, as the governor mentioned, in the three orders of government: legislative, federal, state, and certainly at the local level. Yes, Sergio, thank you. Without a doubt, this is true. I am going to direct these last ideas that have arisen here, because in the terms of economic recovery and of the productive capabilities caused by this economic crisis that we are experiencing, there is enormous opportunity for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean local leaders and regional leaders such as Sergio and Governor Fayed have taken up in the state of Hidalgo. But there are concrete cases too, Marco. Imagine the major town halls in Mexico City, such as Ecatepec or Ixtapalapa, that have 2 million population in each district. If they had a policy in place, we could find them generating regulations as though they were a country, because of the size of these districts, Chalco, Nesa. If they were able to take decisions of transforming local SMEs, seeking investment from telecom operators as though they were a foreign entity, then we could very quickly transform the economy for those populous locations. So digitization is an act not only guaranteeing fundamental rights, but it guarantees life itself, survival, economic survival for citizens. What is your opinion, Marco, on this?
Tu micrófono.
Microphone, please. Ready. I agree with you that the creation of these endeavors in which we have the participation of the public and private sector promoting, adopting these services is a winning idea in this process of recovery and digitization. Something that we see in recent days is the different platforms for those who are not connected or just recently connected, newcomers, so that they can jump on the wagon very quickly and benefit from this transformation. The emphasis in all countries around the world today, developed countries, is digital transformation. In Europe, for example, for this type of initiatives, like you were talking about, equal to a district in Mexico City, is talking about funds for recovery to reach these sectors in remote communities to digitize them, because we have seen the vulnerability that exists here that we are facing, and vulnerability on one hand, and as the Chinese say, crisis in Chinese means danger and opportunity. It has two elements, crisis, danger, and opportunity. So there's a huge opportunity to become aware of the opportunities in digital transformation, opportunities for the different sectors, opportunities to participate. And today, digital transformation is not an option anymore. Perhaps in the past, it was an option, but today it is unavoidable. In terms of the pandemic, leaving a significant economic impact. And if we look at this at the international level, we also see that the main competitors in Mexico are making decisions, radical decisions for structural reforms for benefits in digital transformation. Our main competitor in China, where they are deploying extremely aggressively the new connectivity, which is 5G, with their national plans and data economy plans and plans for industry transformation, we are facing a tsunami here. Not only are we facing a challenge of recovering ourselves, but there are going to be many waves. The tsunami that comes with the digital transformation and 5G and data analytics, cloud computing is of such dimensions that if we keep ignoring it, we will no longer be competitive. It is very important here because in Mexico, we need to bring in as soon as possible the 5G technology, not just 5G technology, but all of the components of 5G. Here, it's necessary to deploy not just wireless technology, but it should go hand in hand with a digitization strategy for all sectors, or designing a strategy based on 4.0 right now, or a industrial policy. There are so many choices. 5G is going to be one of these transformative forces only if we have all of the ingredients in the pot. The different stakeholders that are going to benefit should be aligned and coordinated if they are to benefit from this transformative tsunami. And what I see here is that in the different fronts, despite the economic impact of the pandemic, the emphasis on transformation, digital transformation, is of the utmost importance, as well as the health transformation. And this should give us a clue about where we are to head. because there have been digital agenda efforts to handle those who are not connected, but there is a lot of room out there to create a digital agenda for those who are connected already to join the new economy, the economy of data and the economy of artificial intelligence. So then we need to look at the base of the pyramid, but we should not disregard the possibility of working throughout the pyramid, because if not, that gap, the digital gap in countries such as ours, is going to be of such magnitude that we will be left out of the game. We will no longer be competitive in attracting foreign investment, nor in our capacity of production, nor of handling the most basic needs of our people. So it's important to look at this from a holistic approach at the new technologies and coordinated efforts, public and private, and see how they can make a big difference. And precisely in this country, what we need is to articulate public-private investment to resolve and close many of the existing gaps. I am out of time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marco. Congresswoman, this is a very interesting time because we want to hear the testimony of what happens when the logic is canceled out and we are facing digital and innovation processes. At this point in time, we're all subject to innovation processes, every single one. Learning to use the computer more and learning to understand and help our parents and grandparents to become a part of the digital world. And then we have the USMCA at the same time. So many things at once. The first agreement that is undersigned in the planet that includes the chapter of telecoms, digital commerce, and intellectual property. All of these things together, science, technology, innovation, telecoms, information society, this is a great moment in time precisely to rethink the legal framework that all citizens can have access to technologies, and science and technology is going to be further developed with the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. So what is your vision at this point in time of analyzing once again or rethinking the historic moment from the legislative standpoint? In legislation, we are now facing a great opportunity, an excellent one, because we are drawing up the new general law on science and technology, which gives us the opportunity of bringing in telecoms, intellectual property, e-commerce, and everything that we see right now going on. We also have to have an effect and insist on changing the curricula at universities, the syllabus, so that we can support new generations who are going to be covering these new job positions that will be created. A lot of them have already been created. So what we are facing is that first we have to ensure that the new law on science and technology supports, with our support, will support these new topics, the inclusion of them, and that it will also provide us the opportunity to discuss technological sovereignty, cybersecurity, which is where we are working really hard, because with these new technologies, we are realizing just how vulnerable digital matters are and how cybercrime is on the rise in the most straightforward communications, even through cellular, telephony, cybercrime. So what we have is a need to support and promote these initiatives, cybersecurity, connectivity to, and more. We must ensure that this be approached from a democratic standpoint. Other speakers already spoke before me about the fact that at this time there are regions that are not fully connected to the internet. And this is a project that this federal government has embraced to connect all regions of the country. And in telecoms, there are going to be many problems because there are mountainous areas, there are geographic uh, areas that are very diverse, and connectivity gets lost there. It is a huge challenge, but it is also an opportunity in technology, in technological terms, that we are facing. And from the heart of the Committee on Science and Technology at the lower chamber in Mexico, we must legislate and we must focus on the problems at this time. These are not just problems that might occur, they are here. This pandemic has made it very clear what it is that we need to work on, and we must support infrastructure that is being created to develop all of these new technological innovations. But I think that it is the time right now from the lower chamber, House of Representatives in Mexico, to make sure we use the very capable people that we have in Mexico to resolve these problems. We have carried out many talks and at universities, many talks with private initiative, and it is now the time to join efforts as society, bring in private enterprise, scientists, academia, and I think that that is where we will find the solution. We listen to them, we hold open parliament discussions, and from these open parliament discussions, we now move the topics into the new legislation on science and technology, where we will all have to listen to one another and what digitization entails, the work that is being done, everything that we are doing right now. We must create a legal framework for the democratic aspects that everybody might reach these new technologies, because regrettably right now we are seeing that there are gaps, technological gaps that are huge. There are young people who need to use these new technologies, but because they don't have internet in the area where they live, not because they don't want to, but because the signal doesn't reach them, they are facing difficulties to connect and to move forward with their studies. So I think that right now, at this point in time, what we must do is support, listen, dialogue, and transform in bills, and defend these technological sovereignty, cybersecurity, embrace these topics, digitization, and we need to legislate to avoid leaving something by the wayside. What we need to be is democratic in our approach, offering equal technological opportunities for one and all. Thank you, Congresswoman. Commissioner Camacho, and in listening to a Congresswoman right now at this important juncture in time, one looks at international experiences that you are well aware of. And the United States is investing $20 billion to generate coverage in rural areas with America Connected program, which is a huge amount of money to connect 6 million inhabitants. And Spain, Europe announced a program, a pan-European digital transformation priority program to release 5G as soon as possible in the European countries. But then we have local initiatives, and very likely the most audacious one, the most aggressive perhaps, is the proposal from Spain to invest 140 billion euros in digital transformation for citizens, companies, and public administration. This is an absolute proposal on digital transformation, and I liked what I read. That it is a shared initiative, and in Spain, everybody was there. We had at the table, we had parliament, companies, autonomous agents, and we know that telecoms is regulatory in nature, but for me, it is the expert in digital matters in Mexico. And I think that with all of these, the work at the state level is enriching. How to build vision of integration with everyone, how to sustain a dialogue that is inclusive, that we might recognize the value of digital aspects and weave a partnership, Commissioner. At the Institute, as you have mentioned already, we are the regulator, but naturally we hold a privileged position because of our knowledge of the technical aspects. I think that everyone, or at least most of the stakeholders, are aware of the importance in investing in digital transformation. What I see here is that there is a certain type of restriction, budgetary restrictions that are very hard to overcome. At the same time, I think that there is a path that entails the participation of various stakeholders, for example, the state and the bills that the present government is moving forward that involve the infrastructure of the Federal Electricity Company, known as the CFE, that took 70 years to build and that basically reaches the entire nation, the CFE of Mexico, the support that is being proffered to the ANTAM shared network, and I think that to compensate the problems, budgetary problems in the coming 2 to 3 years, it's going to be very hard to dedicate billions of dollars, which of course would be ideal. But I do think we must involve all of the local entrepreneurs, private enterprise, communities, nonprofits, to help with that final pull to provide coverage in low density population areas or low income areas. And the state's actions, I believe, should focus more on matters of transportation and facilitating the deployment of infrastructure and fostering that these actors and large telecoms, the traditional ones, as well as the newcomers, including the local private ones and social networks, to have the capacity to access input, connection to internet, transportation, and the ease of deploying their own resources to take the internet to remote regions. I think that would resolve the access aspect, or at least it would help greatly regarding access. Very likely there are a series of issues that will arise and have to be taken care of. For example, the use of digital technologies is also a matter that has to be discussed broadly. We must draw up plans and strategic projects to promote full adoption of technologies, the adoption of financial aspects and educational areas, and health, of course, very important. So I do believe that we are, as an institute, holding the possibility of exerting influence and playing a crucial role in this type of strategy. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sergio. Now, I'm going to specifics now, because once again, we say that we need new public policy that was non-existent, because the digital resource demands that. It needs public policy that will understand what it's for and who it's destined for. You mentioned at the beginning one of the aspects, you talked about industry, the industrial aspect in addition. And I have a concern. When we were carrying out one of these digital events in recent weeks, we invited several industrial parks to take part, and we said that they were the new stakeholders in 5G and digitization. I must tell you that nobody accepted, none of them, of these industrial parks accepted this. They said that they had infrastructure resources in physical assets, and they did not envision themselves as part of the digital world. Enormous industrial parks, warehouses, and so much more. Physical infrastructure. And I said, but the matter of infrastructure that you had must evolve to digital. You have to prepare for this. This is not one of their mistakes. They are lacking in information. They are lacking in a program that works on digitization of industrial parks. So we have about 500 industrial parks in the country that should be benefited by our 5G. And they must have the ability to offer those resources in coordination with telecoms operators and together with the EFT. So how is it that we can help build these public policy aspects, the industrial digital policy? Where is it? This is something else we talked about in the state of Hidalgo. Let's suppose it were a country and carried out a roadshow to present telecoms operators around the country what can be done. Perhaps it's a new moment in time for public policy that did not exist in the past. What do you think of this, Sergio? Sure, Jorge, this is a very important topic that you're touching on. I think that we must distinguish between industrial parks and the business leaders that lie behind them. In conversations that we have had, certainly the business leaders, the entrepreneurs say that it is fundamental to have access to fiber optic, particularly to be much more competitive in this digitized world and to enter full force into the 4.0 industry. In this regard, I agree with you. And in fact, it's not. Sometimes we just think that the 4.0 industry is just at industrial parks, but it also has to do with agricultural, precision farming areas, those that have to be connected to internet networks. This is something we've been exploring in the state of Hidalgo as well. And to achieve this, I think that there's something important here in public policy and deployment of our own infrastructure that can support this federal policy and shared network and CFE and Telecoms, our federal electricity company, so that we can also support investing in our own local networks to reach the last mile through strategic connections. In the state of Hidalgo, over the past 4 years, we have deployed 300 kilometers of fiber optic around the main cities of the south of the state. And certainly these connect the most industrial areas for us. So we understand that we need to connect these industrial parks with quality coverage where operators may not have an appetite for it. Then the state can take over with a model such as the one in India or the subsidized by the government in subsidizing telecoms to reach that last mile. We've done that in the state of Hidalgo with these 300 kilometers of fiber optic. What we are doing is having the private sector do the actual work for us. Fantastic, Sergio. And now something else that we are trying to encompass, everything that we have seen in the conferences earlier this morning through this moment. What about the digital resource as an economic and social resource, as a new public good? How can we envision that? And we'll close with you, Marco. Microphone. Yes, I would talk about the importance of this becoming state policy, as is the case in the rest of the developed nations, and taking this up, as you have said, digital agendas at the national level and local level as well, so that they can be fundamental locally, besides triggering investment, private investment. For example, a while ago you mentioned investment in Spain, a monstrous amount of money in being invested, but they are placing their bets on the fact that every euro invested, private investment is going to invest 4 to 5 times that amount. So these investments trigger other investments, and the digital agendas end up articulating vertical sectors and that will benefit from digital transformation, and that together will create conditions to improve employment and income and more. While it is true that the investment is required for this, it is also investment in the midterm. It's important to concentrate investment over the coming years as well to heal the economy. The world provides evidence that there is a transformation alternative that demands an approach and a decision on behalf of state policy that not only entails the work being done, but demands the different levels of government mobilizing the different sectors and creating agendas that will facilitate transformation. This is entirely possible, and in addition, it is necessary both to recover as well as to be able to compete against our main competitors nationally. And lastly, I would like to congratulate the Congresswoman for the work that is being done on this law of innovation, and I agree that there is enormous human capital and capability here, and now at venture capital, where we write checks for millions of dollars for groups of 4 or 5 people because they have a good idea, something that we must bear in mind in these new laws is precisely that driving national entrepreneurship is very important for startups to have the possibility and move forward and make sure that the funds and investments at startups and the conditions that will allow us to finance scaling these enterprises as well. And there are technology and science centers that go hand in hand with all of the private enterprises that invest in this. It's important to look at other experiences, particularly what is happening in Spain, where this type of entrepreneur is recognized specifically. So this is a matter of ecosystems, and it's necessary to deal with this holistically. It is an opportunity and to use digital transformation, the gender gaps, other gaps that need to be closed, and we can do this. And what you're doing, Jorge, is put your finger on the wound here, and we are recognizing what incremental approximations are, taking these baby steps and requiring a radical decision and saying, look, we are going to do this, embrace this, because Korea did this. And look where Korea is now. So the opportunity in Mexico is precisely that, to take up digital transformation as state policy. And this, offers the opportunity of taking that leap and mobilizing human capital when we have this type of coordinated efforts. From the standpoint of present companies and startups who face a general line of what is to come in future businesses, these agendas have that ability to be visible and share in efforts. And because of the pandemic, the transformation is unavoidable. Without a doubt. Thank you so much, Marco Antonio. Now I warmly thank you all for your participation. Congresswoman Hernandez, thank you for your time, your commitment. Thank you. And to Commissioner Ramiro Camacho, I appreciate and value the time you have given us today. Mr. Vargas, thank you so much, and I wish you the utmost success, ongoing success. Thank you for the time you have given us. Marco, you are a benchmark for us with your mindset and your commitment to the sector. And one of the conclusions is precisely that the process for digital transformation is imperative in connectivity as a state vision, precisely what I am imagining. And according to what the Congresswoman said, connectivity is a fundamental right established in the 6th article of the Constitution, the right to access to internet and to the ITCs, to broadband and to telecom services. And let us remember that these facilitate the exercise of rights, as we have said throughout this event, health and education, but it also improves the well-being of people. And this scheduled element of it can involve the digital transformation at the same time with scheduled development programs that are underway. They can all go hand in hand and be taken into account side by side as something to understand the phenomenon of change in the Mexican state. I thank you for your time. I thank you for the time you have dedicated to us, and we will see one another very soon. Thank you. Thank you. And at the same time, I would warmly welcome Paula Berdulini, who is the director of the DPL agency, who from Buenos Aires is watching us and analyzing what we're doing through our telecoms networks. And today she has a closing assessment of the event for us. Paula, please. Thank you, Jorge Fernando. Thank you for inviting me to this event and innovation and digital economy, digital spotlight. This is a reflection that is going to be lasting. Everything we have said has been so important today. This webinar was organized by the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, and the Regional Instrument for the European Union, the National Association of Telecoms, Anatel, Huawei, and facilitated by others. And to begin, I would like to mention that this year, 2020, not only was the year of the pandemic, but it also tested all of our health systems and all of the economies of the country. But it was also the year that accentuated inequalities and gaps. We have seen this: children who can receive education online, those who couldn't, people who were able to work remotely, those who couldn't. The health crisis, in addition, is leading to growth of GDP to the lowest historic records ever. In Latin America, as we have heard in this event, we have seen a rise in poverty and inequality. Social impact of the pandemic is being of particular difficulty for this 40% of workers who do not have access to any type of help or social protection mechanism, as well as for the micro and SMEs who are lacking in capability to amortize this blow because of a lack of technological assistance. This made me rethink about the way in we are projecting social development and economic development. Here at this event, we underscored and we agreed that the scenario of this pandemic can become an opportunity for growth. Certainly, this is true if we know as countries to optimize on the benefits of digitization and the incorporation of new technologies. Without a doubt, there is no other path, and digitization is the driver for growth, economic growth in the post-pandemic era. Digital transformation allows things to be done differently and more efficiently without losing sight of the essence of the sectors and the industries. We must maintain this and keep digital transformation in sight. This context has underscored that we need to be efficient and supported by public policy that is based on persons with people at the center and the adoption of the ITCs and digital skills. There is consensus that adopting public policy that is solid and digital agendas and partnerships, both at the national scale as well as the international, can then turn this complex scenario into an opportunity to redefine the social contract and recover consumption, prioritizing, of course, the well-being of people. I think that we must redirect public policy so that they will contribute to the adoption of technological tools that will then allow digitization of the productive sectors and choose priorities as the basis for local needs, because we must not lose sight of local needs, and they are not the same across the board for all countries or even all cities. Let us also remember that digital infrastructure is the groundwork for productivity, economy, and well-being as a whole. They constitute the basis of all the value chains and social development chains that are linked to it, as we heard today. That is why we must generate collaboration and build partnerships so that the sectors that have not traditionally been digital in nature be transformed in favor of a more productive economy. According as the industries become digitized, and they will be able to arrive at the heart of the economy and the population spillover more quickly. Digital transformation in production is going to be contingent on a series of interventions and sectors, but in addition, the adoption of ITCs in and of themselves. Let us remember that that intelligent connectivity and the development of digital competencies are facilitating elements, crucial ones in the digital era. Policies destined to promote digital competencies should be in sync with industrial policy and technologies of a broad scope in order to ensure that the different work phases and places have available the capabilities that productive sectors need. In this scenario of recovery, SMEs play a super crucial role. They are an essential part of the productive force of Latin America, and they demand the support of institutions for digital transformation, for training, for adopting new digital skills, for access to technology, to platforms, and also to support those sectors, as we said earlier, have not traditionally been digital, and those are the ones that demand the most support. Digitization for SMEs is going to contribute to increasing productivity and competitiveness. which will generate more income, more jobs, and more trained personnel. And I think that we need to connect until we reach universal digital inclusion and have broadband available for the population, all industries and sectors, SMEs, academic and health institutions. We need to be more resilient, and we need to support this on trust and move forward toward intelligent connectivity, improved broadband, operate in the public cloud services, content, and all of this facilitated by artificial intelligence. Without a doubt, today at the Digital Spotlight, there was a message of digital leadership that was very important, and let me mention some. The importance of fostering collaboration between public and private and social sectors, the need of promoting digital competencies that will be fair for all of the ecosystem, the relevance and pertinence of governments investing even more in digital infrastructure for all, and recognizing that digital technologies are the crucial driver for recovery and growth in the economies of the countries. Digital well-being is the objective of the new generation of public policies and local policies, and can become drivers for growth and economic development in an ongoing manner for societies. Plus, digital technologies can also contribute to mitigating climate change and inclusion and transforming public institutions to improve governance and rebuild trust, and certainly providing well-being. Mexico and the rest of Latin America face a huge challenge, but at the same time, fortunately, they have the public and private talent to transform adversity in growth. As a region, we should not lose this opportunity to foment and foster digital technology for all. It is of the utmost importance for all of us. Thank you, Jorge Fernando, and the organizers for allowing me to share these strategic ideas. And I take with me the reflection, the thought that digital technologies, the most innovative, are helping in the recovery after the pandemic in Mexico and in Latin America. Thank you. Thank you, Paula Bertolini from Buenos Aires. Without a doubt, you are absolutely right, and is right on target. I would particularly like to thank ELAC, ECLAC, the OECD, the CAF Development Bank, not only because of the studies that they allowed us to understand and their vision for the economic digitization. We presented studies in recent months for entire events, reviewing the mindset of these three organizations. And today we presented another document, the one of Huawei, the perspective of digitization to face the effects of the pandemic and release economic recovery. These documents belong to a new generation of a new mindset and perspective to face growth and the recovery of the economy. This is highly valuable, and we are very happy to take part in these extremely important manners of facing the digital issues before us. I thank you all for your patience. This is the last event that the team is producing, and we are going to be reviewing the company. I thank Dr. Jorge Bravo for his support and his persistence and his intellect in being very careful of our messages and guiding the content and working on the curatorship of the events. and Eli Salazar for the talent in taking the production forward, and the DPL team for their vocation of communicating and disseminating the well-being digital messages throughout Latin America, in this case, Mexico. We will see you next year at the upcoming event related to digital agenda in Latin America. I am Jorge Negrete. Thank you. And I wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And we will be seeing you next year. See you soon.